Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest here in Austin, Texas, and I've had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972. And we are completing our series on Buddhist meditation and the 12-step journey. And our guest who has guided us through this is Kevin Griffin. He is the author of One Breath at a Time, Buddhism and the 12 Steps, along with a number of other books, and I have put a link to this and to his website in the show notes. Invite you to go there and pick up some of his latest material. Kevin, welcome back. Yeah, I hope this has been fun for you. I haven't really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. A great conversation. How many meetings have we had now?
I've lost count.
It's like 5 or 6 or something.
Who's counting? It's like when we were drinking. Who's counting these things?
Yeah.
So we're having a good time, and people are learning some important stuff. So that's what's important for me here. So we are up to step 12. So this is our final episode, and step 12, of course, says having had a spiritual awakening. As the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So let me start off, if I could, with a quote from your book. And you write, after his enlightenment, someone asked the Buddha, "Are you a man?" "No," he replied. "Are you a god?" "No," he repeated. "Then what are you?" "I am awake," he said. And this became the name that his followers called him, Mr. Awake Buddha. So Kevin, after all your years of meditating, how do you understand that phrase in the 12th step, spiritual awakening? What are we talking about?
Well, I understand it in a variety of ways, and I think it's important to think of it in very broad terms. Certainly, in different traditions of Buddhism, there are pretty explicit definitions of what it means to be enlightened, but there's also a sense of sort of a progression, as there is in 12-step recovery, that each step of the way, there is a moment of enlightenment, a moment of clarity, we call it, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And so that to me is a spiritual awakening as well. One of my arguments is that every one of the 12 steps includes a kind of awakening. It's awakening to our condition, the first step, and awakening to the possibility of change. Step 2, awakening to the need to let go. And step 3, awakening to our inventory. And step 4, and so on. So it's kind of like you can take a big picture and sort of have this idea of this grand thing of, in Buddhism, complete enlightenment means that all greed, hatred, and delusion has been kind of wiped out from your mind or your heart mind. But that winds up, I think, setting such a high bar that it becomes, almost pointless that's great, keep practicing, and maybe in 10,000 lifetimes you'll attain that or whatever. I'll say a couple other things. One is that one of the great 20th century Thai forest masters, Ajahn Buddhadasa, talked about little nirvanas, that every time we're kind of wake up to the present moment, it's an experience of nirvana. It's a spiritual awakening. Well, there's that. Something I'll point listeners to is Jack Cornfield, one of the leading Western Buddhist teachers. He has an essay called Enlightenments, plural. It's in his book, Bringing Home the Dharma. It's kind of a survey, first and foremost, of Buddhist traditions and their different views of what enlightenment is. And then he broadens it out, I think, some more, as I recall. I haven't read it in a while, but he might even include other traditions. But his point is that we can't really encapsulate enlightenment or spiritual awakening as one thing. It takes many forms. There's some argument that, if this doesn't get too esoteric, that the form of spiritual awakening we have is directly determined by the tradition we have been engaged in, so that a Christian might have a vision of the Holy Spirit or the heart of Christ, the heart of Jesus. A Hindu might have a vision of the Brahma, and a Buddhist will have maybe a vision of emptiness. There's a great book on that topic. I can't remember the title of it, but Lex Hickson, I think, was the author's name, where he kind of analyzes all the different enlightenment traditions and makes this argument that, I'm totally paraphrasing him, I think that there is something called enlightenment that is essential to the human capacity for this enlightenment. But the way we perceive it, the way we understand it, is very conditioned.
Right.
So what it really is, we don't maybe ever get to know. We don't get to know.
I'm with you. I follow you.
Yeah. So the main thing to me is I don't know if there's a main thing, but I'll say I think it's really important for people to appreciate whatever changes and growth and transformation they've experienced, not to measure yourself against some lofty idea, but to appreciate, I really am different. I respond to the world differently. I see the world differently. I live differently. That is a spiritual awakening.
I'm with you on this, that it's a state of consciousness that's different from ego consciousness. And it's like the ego gets suspended for a while, never for too long. It has a way of certainly coming back. But Jung called it the transcendent function that's built into human beings, that we have a built-in capacity for not only experiencing this world, but experiencing this other world, this sacred world. And it's not only difficult, it may be even impossible to put it into words, but it's not beyond experience. And those are common to people. And they're very different all across cultures. And I agree 100% that someone's going to experience it this way because of their tradition, and somebody's going to experience it very differently if they're across the world and were raised in a different tradition. When you started off, you say in your book that you were expecting the blinding white light variety,
right?
And didn't happen, hey?
Well, right, and that's again what I mean about having some goal or some ideal that we're thinking we're moving toward, and I think it's really unhelpful. I guess there's two other threads I'd like to take up on this. One is just the idea that if the desire to drink and use is removed, as it was for me, that is what we call a transformational insight or transformative insight. That is to say, we can have an insight where you realize something, but you might go on behaving and feeling the same way you did before, even though you have that insight. And that's very common in spiritual circles in Buddhism. People go on a retreat and they're like, oh, wow, it's so amazing. And then afterward, they just return to their life. And that's certainly the way I was in my early practice before I got sober. When I was meditating a lot, I would have these meditative experiences that felt transcendent. But then afterward, I would go out and have a drink. It sort of didn't make any sense.
Right.
But so for me, the fact that my desire to drink and use was removed was probably the most important spiritual experience of my life, because it allowed everything else to happen. But in Buddhist circles or in whatever, in a lot of circles, that wouldn't be viewed as particularly spiritual. I don't know how people would view it, but to me, because it really transforms things, it has more meaning than some. People come back from their ayahuasca retreat and they're like, oh man, everything is, connected. I see it all now. But they're still not, they're still acting in the same way and living the same way.
Right.
So there's that. I think that is, for me, what's really important, the transformation. And that's what in Theravadan Buddhism, the school that I'm really most versed in, what it's talking about when it talks about these. And this is the other thread I wanted to take up, the technical thread on Theravadan Buddhism, which is something that I know about. So I'm not talking in such like sort of general and abstract terms. There's said to be these 4 stages that one goes through. How you get to those stages is kind of what all the different teachers are trying to help people to do. So different techniques are meant to arouse certain things. So there's these 4 stages that involve these 10 qualities called fetters being removed.
Mm.
And with the first stage, there are 3 fetters that are removed. The most important one being self-view. So it's all about ego, right? That supposedly, when one has that experience, this breakthrough, this experience of nibbana or nirvana, they no longer have any belief in the idea of a separate self, a unique, a solid, separate self. It's said that they can still forget, but they anytime they, come to any awareness, they're like, oh, right, I know that. So that's very powerful. It's only when you get to the 4th stage that you remove anger and desire and craving. But as I say, there's like these unwholesome qualities that are supposedly fall away at each of these stages. It's very technical, right?
Okay.
In Theravadan Buddhism, it's like you can read up on it and they take it. And then you kind of go, well, that's great, but what am I going to do about, my dog, my job, my wife?
You quote from Cornfield's book. I love the title. After the ecstasy, the laundry.
No, exactly.
That's what you're talking
I love
about.
that title too. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
No, exactly. That's the thing. So, if you haven't attained these things, it's so easy to get into this striving. And I see this a fair amount in the Buddhist world.
Yeah.
Where people are striving to get to these places. And that very striving is exactly what the Buddha said. Well, don't do that. That's what causes suffering, striving. So there's this built-in paradox in Buddhism, which is that there's a goal. It's not that there's no goal. There's a goal, enlightenment.
Good.
And you have to do things to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But if internally there's a grasping after that goal,
mm-hmm.
then you're actually moving away from it.
That's egotism.
Right.
That's the ego reasserting itself one more time. Another
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, it's this great challenge. And I know you've dealt with this. Any serious spiritual person sitting down, watching their own mind, watching their heart, feels that conflict like, oh, I'm trying to calm down my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I'm fighting with my mind. I have to let go. And then we realize that the mechanics of that are very subtle
Mm-hmm.
and require this investigation of our experience, investigating, watching the mind, watching the body, watching the emotions, watching this whole process and seeing, well, how do I do this dance? How do I, move deeper into a quieter place or a place of more compassion or, just more presence? How do I do that and make it happen? And so it's a very subtle thing. I compare it to when you watch, I like to compare it to watching a Major League Baseball player come up to bat. And the guy is about to stand in the box and face like a 95-mile-an-hour fastball that could kill him if it hits him in the head. And he walks up, spits, knocks the dirt off his shoes, says hi to the ump, says hi to the catcher, casually swings the bat a little bit. Then the ball comes in and there's total focus. Boom, hits it. Bam, he hits the fact that anybody can hit a fastball is unbelievable anyway, but there's this letting go that's happening. They don't go up to bat like, okay, I'm really going to hit this thing now.
Right.
No, they come up like, oh, I'm relaxed. My body is, I've done, and what they've done is they've trained themselves and prepared themselves for that moment so that in that moment, they don't have to cling. And what they do is they relax in that moment. They breathe, relax, let the tension out of my body, and just let my body do what it does. So this is what we try to train in meditation. We keep doing our meditation practice over and over. We call it a practice, right? Just like you're practicing hitting the batting practice.
Practice these principles in all your affairs.
Yeah, exactly.
There it is.
And then we, in that moment, we just let go and allow the force of our stream of what right effort to take over.
You brought this up in previous episodes, and I didn't take a deep dive into it, but you said the particular school of Buddhism that you practice is very much body-oriented. It includes the body, not trying to transcend the body, but bring it along. Is that what you're talking about here when you're discussing this, or at least part of?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because attunement to the body, it's this great book I've been reading lately. It's been out for quite a while. The Body Keeps the Score.
Right.
Which is mostly about trauma, but really it can be broadened out. The body is a great, the body never lies, right? Like what's going on, if you can really attune to what's going on in the body, you feel tension, you feel grasping, you feel letting go, you feel joy, you feel love. All our emotions really start in our bodies. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know, I won't say start, but they're alive in our bodies. They live in our bodies.
Yeah. But you got to pay attention to that.
And it's much easier to pay attention to your body, I think, than it is to pay attention to your mind. It's hard to be mindful of a thought. It's kind of like thoughts kind of take over consciousness. Yeah. Whereas you can bring attention into the body, and then the body lets you know, in a way, what's going on in your mind.
Very important part of step 10, I think.
Yeah.
Nice. There came a time when you were questioning, am I ready to teach? Have I grown sufficiently, or is this egotism on my part to begin teaching? And you touched there in your story on impermanence, suffering, and not self. Could you reflect on those for a minute?
Right, now I remember what you're referring to. So this is a whole other podcast here.
We do
another
have that problem,
series.
don't we?
These are called the 3 characteristics in Buddhism. Impermanent nature of everything, which is easy for people to understand. And then what's called the unsatisfactory nature of things, which is what I'm calling suffering there, which is a little harder for people to understand. But when you realize that if everything is impermanent, then there is no end point of satisfaction. Mm-hmm. That is to say, an arriving where now it doesn't change. I've got it now, right?
Yeah.
So there's this unsatisfactory quality to things, which implies then that we really need to let go, because if we're striving for satisfaction, we're never going to get it. So we need to let go of the striving for some permanent resolution to life's challenges and just see that it's just an ongoing flow. The characteristic of impermanence, the unsatisfactoriness, and then the not self, which is the hardest of the 3 to explain. And really is particularly that one. It's not meant to be analyzed. It's not an intellectual idea. It's not a belief system. It's the Buddha says, well, I watched my experience and it was constantly changing and it wasn't satisfactory at any moment. It didn't satisfy me at any moment. Why would I say that what's happening to me is me? Mm. That is, why do I say this thought is my thought, or I am, this person, I am angry, I am happy? Where is the self that I'm pointing to?
Right.
Self is just a feeling we have because there's a continuity of consciousness. Because I can remember waking up this morning and I can remember going to bed last night, and it seems like I'm the same person, then there must be something there that is me. But the Buddha keeps going, well, what is it? Is it your thoughts? How can I say my thoughts are me? They're constantly changing. There's nothing, they can be completely contradictory. Is it my body? My body's constantly changing, and certainly not, the body, the Kevin that I'm looking at on the screen here is not the Kevin that was around 50 years ago or 5 minutes ago. That this body is constantly changing. Is it my emotions, my feelings? So obviously there are these traditions, both in the Brahmanic tradition and in the Western Judeo-Christian or Abrahamic traditions, that posit something called a soul. And, I think that the view that the way I understand the Buddhist view on that is that essentially we create the idea of soul as a consolation to ourselves to make us feel more stable. Like, well, there is a me,
Yeah.
It's not something I even talk about that much in my teaching because people get bothered by it, and then I have to go through this whole routine,
Well, our audience is a lot of deep thinkers out there, so that they can handle it.
So the thing that the Buddha uses as an example, he talks about a chariot. We would do this with a car, right? There's a car in front of my house. What is the car? And, you go, is it the engine? Well, without the chassis, they're not going to go anywhere. Is it the chassis? No, without the engine, it's not going to go anywhere. Is it the doors? Is it the roof? No, what I call a car is just a collection of other things. And of course, if I look at those things, I realize they're just collections of other things, and everything winds up being down to the atomic level and the subatomic level. And it's like, well, there's no car there. That's just a useful way of describing these functional things. And self is the same. Self is a useful functional idea. I mean, if I go to the airport and they say, let me see your ID to get on the plane, you're like, well, there is no self. I'm just a collection of, different things. They're not going to let me on the plane. And so, yeah, it's a functional and useful fiction, but it's not absolute reality. And it's ultimately our attachment to self that is really at the root of our suffering. And it's the same thing that Bill Wilson says, self-centeredness, that was my problem today. Well, more than self-centeredness from a Buddhist view, but it's talking about the same thing. And I talk about the anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions. Well, what is anonymity?
Not self.
It's not self. It's letting go of identity, right?
Yeah,
and so it's the foundation of the traditions is not clinging to identity.
And that's a huge part of the spiritual awakening, or having an experience of that, temporary.
In practical terms, it's not that I walk around going, am I a self? Where's my self? It's just that it's like one of those things where you go, oh, I'm really attached to this. Can I let go of this thing? What I think is right. My biases and my opinions and all my thoughts are about clinging to a self. And if somebody else has a different opinion, like my wife, for instance, can I just say, oh, that's okay. Yeah. All right. I'm just going to let go of that. So that's where I think it becomes a practical thing. And to realize I'm just attached to this because I want people to see me in a certain way. Or I want to, be in control in some particular way.
Let's move on to the other parts of the 12 steps. So you say being of service can take different forms, and you tell about teaching meditation at a homeless shelter. And what was that like for you, and what was it like for them?
Well, hard for me to say what it was like for them, but first of all, I always find it interesting to go into these environments like prisons, and you've probably done that with meetings and homeless shelters and places where we stereotype who's there.
Right.
And what I almost invariably discover is that what I always discover is that they are actually fully formed human beings with their own spiritual life that has nothing to do with them being homeless or being criminals or whatever their problem, the institution they're in suggests. And so I find that really helpful, breaking down my own biases and stereotypes of people. So you go into a place with homeless people, and in 5 minutes, you're just with people, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's helpful for me. And it feels really good because I can see that they appreciate being treated as human beings, as fully formed human beings, not as homeless or,
put into a category. Yeah.
Yeah. They're being treated as adults, treated with respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested in what they have to say and what their experience is. And so it's the same as any other meditation teaching. The teachings are the same. The human mind is the same. And the conversation is very much the same
Mm-hmm.
kind of questions and challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, what is so precious about step 12, carrying the message. I mean, I'm a very self-centered person. I'm a very selfish person. That's my tendency.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to step 12 with working with a sponsor, and he told me to start doing service at meetings, which is how I started,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I tried to sponsor a couple people. I was never very successful as a sponsor, but it was surprising to me, again, because I'm so self-centered, to discover how pleasurable it was to do things for other people, to do things for the meeting. I started, did cleanup at a meeting.
Sure.
And it was like, oh, this feels really good. And of course, we know this is the message of step 12, like helping others brings us joy. And it's, again, these are not in my personal revelations, taking my focus off my own preferences or my own wants and putting them on others is very freeing. And that goes back to letting go of self. So it's one of the thing to me about the steps that's so interesting is that it tells you to do a bunch of stuff. It doesn't say necessarily, maybe the literature says it, but more generally, but the steps themselves don't tell you exactly why you're doing these things or what the results are going to be. But there are all kinds of extra results besides the obvious things that come about through each step. Now, that's what's so fascinating about the 12 steps and why I've enjoyed my own work of really investigating them and trying to write about them and think about them beyond the kind of strictures of traditional AA ideas and say, well, what's this really doing? Like, how is this working? And trying to connect it to larger themes, and archetypes.
And you teach what you want to learn. That's just so basic. I'm grateful that I was in the addiction treatment field as an addict. I benefited from every patient who came before me. I get to see myself in some form there, and I can either I identify with them or I put them in a box into a category and dismiss them as people. And that's the egotism. Buddha must have been a hell of a teacher, huh?
Yes, it's a point. In fact, this is who he was, and what makes him different is kind of defined that he attained this full enlightenment that we talk about. It's called, in the Theravada tradition, arhat. It's kind of like a saint. He attained that level, but many other people are capable of and do attain that level. But he has something else, which is that he's a world teacher.
Mm.
And so, again, this is like coming out of the tradition. I'm not saying this is, facts. This is how it's understood. That what makes him different from just an ordinary enlightened person is that he's got this greater capacity to teach, and that it's supposedly, and again, that you have this mythology, right? That he set his sights on that many, many lifetimes earlier and worked at developing these particular qualities to their level of perfection. So there are these 10 perfections that and so he's seen as like more than just enlightened. He has this mastery and this, transcendent wisdom. It's not that he knows everything, but he's not omniscient, but, there's a famous teaching called the handful of leaves, where he's in the forest with a group of monks and he picks up a handful of leaves and he says, "What's greater, the number of leaves in my hand or the number of leaves in the forest?" And the monks, of course, all go, "Well, the number of leaves in the forest is far greater, venerable sir." And Buddha says, "That's right. And what I teach you is equivalent to this handful of leaves. What I know is equivalent to this whole forest."
Mm.
So that's a pretty high, claim on his part. But yeah, he's a brilliant teacher. And the other thing that we see and is talked about is that his teachings are adapted to his listeners.
Right.
In the early Buddhist scriptures, you see that there are these particular suttas that are given to individuals, and they'll focus and take particular emphases depending upon that individual's capacities and what they need to hear. So yeah, he's a master teacher.
He could see in the people he encountered the same potential within them. Would you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he could see what they needed from him.
How to get there.
Yeah,
There. Yeah.
And I think that's part of any teacher's job, is to really attune to the individual that they're working with.
Right.
And obviously he was a master of it. But
yeah. Yeah. Is teaching a science or is it an art? There's an art quality to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, practice these principles in all our affairs. I was looking at that, how we going to translate that into Buddhist practice. And I thought maybe the best way to do this, and you do it in this chapter, is revisiting the Eightfold Path. So perhaps, I know we've touched on some of these before, but maybe as a summation of both the steps and meditation practice, we could go through them, or you could go through them. I'll be the student here. Just touch on each one lightly. You got them memorized, I suppose. If not, I got it in front of me.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Right view. Start there.
Yeah, I want to start with right mindfulness.
Okay.
Because that's the key to developing the other 7 of the Noble Eightfold Path. Because mindfulness itself, and the way the Buddha teaches mindfulness, he essentially says you should practice mindfulness in all your affairs. And in the famous teaching, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, part of it, he's saying, you should be mindful when you're walking forward, when you're walking back, when you're eating, when you're urinating, when you're lying down, when you're falling asleep, when you're waking up, and he just goes through every action you can take. So that's the most direct connection to practicing these principles in all our affairs. It's quite literal. So yes, to go through the path, the elements of the Eightfold Path, and we don't think of the Eightfold Path as linear. It's not quite as developmental as the 12 steps.
Which can be a weakness of the steps, I've found.
Yes.
If I'm not going to get to prayer till I've done the other 10.
Right.
Well, you might want to.
Yeah. And when you get to 12, it doesn't mean that you don't want to keep doing 1 and 4 and 9.
And they're happening to you as well.
Yes.
If you're awake.
Right. Yeah. If you're really practicing. So right view is viewed as both the beginning and the culmination of the path. So the beginning of right view is realizing, I've kind of been misunderstanding how things work. It's a moment of clarity. Yeah, right. And it's fundamentally, it's about seeing how suffering happens and what causes suffering and how to stop suffering. So that's the beginning, because I've been pointed in the wrong direction. I've been seeing things inaccurately. And as the culmination of the path, it's like you have perfect right view. You see everything now perfectly clearly and understand everything. But as a starting point, it's just like, I've kind of had this wrong. I need to shift the way I see things. When we have that insight that, I've been kind of creating suffering in my life by accident because I've been taking the wrong path, then that means that we realize we need to be guided by a different principle. So that takes us to the second factor, which is right intention. Now I'm not just going to see how things are. I'm going to try to act, take on a skillful intention or motivation for my actions, because it's not enough to just think about it. I need to really live it. And the Buddha at a certain point says that motivation, the right intention or the intention behind your actions, is what determines the outcome of those actions, the karmic outcome, which is really interesting. I think I may have talked about this in one of the other episodes, how you can see a homeless person and toss them a quarter and you keep walking, or you can hand them a quarter and sort of look in their eye.
Right.
In both cases, you've done something that was generous, but the internal experience, the motivation behind it, one of them was just get this person away from me, give them some money so they go away. And the other one was, oh, I want to care for this person and humanize them. So that's just my, very
that's good. That's
simple
good.
Example of how motivation can be different depending upon, and the action can be the same,
right?
But that the result is going to be different. And it's not that it's different in that, it's not going to necessarily affect the other person quite the same, but it's you. And it's something we don't talk about that much. What is the emotional impact of your actions? So that's the karmic emotional reaction.
And it's progress to see the impurity of your intent as well. Would you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's with any of this path, I think it's so important. It's progress, not perfection. That, right intention is like, to be this kind of perfect person. Well, no, I can't be that. My intentions are always going to be a little, mixed. But if I understand, I'm a meditation teacher and I get paid for it. So, not on this, but, we'll
No. Well, the check's in the mail, Kevin.
Yeah. But
no stamp on it. But
that's unfortunate.
What are you going to do?
But so I have to deal with the fact that maybe I'm sitting somewhere teaching and I'm hoping that people are going to be generous with me.
Right.
But if I'm thinking about that, then my teaching is going to be really diluted. So to me, it's not so much about trying to have a perfect intention, because I know that's the hope that they're going to give, which is not necessarily right intention. Like there's a little greed in there. It's just, I just don't have, that's not what's, front and center, right? I'm trying to really focus on, and I recognize, there's some greed. I have greed. I have lust. I'm noticing that attractive woman or whatever, but I'm not letting that be what drives me. So that's how I justify or understand, that progress, not perfection, around intention.
Yeah, that's good. That's very helpful.
So the next three factors of the Eightfold Path are what's called sila, or the morality or the behavioral elements. So there's right speech, which is not lying and not manipulating people, not gossiping with language. There's right action, which is the precepts, which are very similar to every religion: not to kill, not to steal, not to harm sexually, not to lie again. But the fifth precept is to not use intoxicants. So that aligns us with the 12 steps. A lot of Buddhists ignore the fifth precept, in the West at least, and I certainly ignored that when I started to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's right livelihood. And I like the fact that in this, what we think of as this spiritual path, it includes work. So it is practicing these principles in all our affairs. It's not just a lofty thing of like, meditate and have some transcendent vision of something, mystical experience of emptiness, but also, what are you doing in your job? Like, how do you approach that? And that's another challenge, particularly in a world that's driven by economics. You can't, you can just give up making money, but it means that then you're just asking other people to take care of you, which is what, monastics do. And that's beautiful, but it's not practical for the whole world. And so most of us have to find a way to reconcile our spiritual beliefs with making a living. And, I think I probably talk about this in the book about being a technical writer. I went back to school in sobriety, and I wound up, with a degree in creative writing, which was not, highly marketable. But I wound up getting a job just writing software manuals. And at the same time, that was when I was sort of starting to teach and getting more deeply and wholly committed to my Dharma practice. And I had to ask myself, well, is this right livelihood? And what I resolved was, well, what was important about it, again, goes back to intention. I can work to just make money, but if I bring an attitude of generosity and caring and compassion, then writing a user manual is an act of kindness for people who need to learn how to use the software. And so, again, it's not a perfect thing. It's not like some ideal. But I realized, to me, it's more about my intention than it is about the title, the job title. And I like to use the example of, when you have an encounter with a customer service rep, and one of them might be just dismissive and sort of difficult and irritable, and you get off the phone, you're like, wow, that was awful. And then another one might be really helpful and caring and taking care of you. They're doing the same job, right? But one of them is bringing a spiritual quality to it. They're really practicing right livelihood. And the other one just isn't, and that's so that's how I think of right livelihood in very practical terms.
And that has an effect on people. They sense it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sense it.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look around the world or work like just in a community, you realize that even though everybody's doing their job just to take care of themselves and maybe their family,
right,
what they're doing is actually weaving together a functional society where I need the garbage man and the barista, and I need the lawyer, and I need the doctor and the nurse, and and I need the meditation teacher, and all these. We're all performing functions within society. We think of our work as being about me and my life, and either my money and my ego and all that. But if you look at the bigger picture, you're actually just serving a function in this bigger social web that depends upon all of us. If nobody, wants to pick the apples, right, we're not going to have any apples,
Yeah. I went and I lived on a kibbutz in Israel,
really?
Communal living for 6 months. You got to study Hebrew for half the day, and then you worked half the day. But the communal element was so fascinating. The prime minister would come. He was a member of the kibbutz. They put that bastard in the kitchen. We're putting him in the kitchen, on garbage duty.
Right.
And he loved it. Yeah. He loved it, And that's what you should get in a monastery, in a community. It's what we should be aiming towards. I don't know that we'll ever achieve it.
And that's the humility, right?
It's all about humility, and it's all about taking care of one another.
I mean, the first time I went on a meditation retreat, one of my first ones, they asked us when we registered if we wanted to do some service, like clean the kitchen or the garbage or the bathroom or whatever. And I was like, no, I'm here to meditate and get enlightened, And again, before I got sober, before I had the steps, I'm going to put in my dishes in the kitchen. And one of my teachers is there with an apron on washing the dishes. Yeah. I'm like, what? What's going on? And so it was later on that I discovered, it's actually really feels really good to do service. And so at a certain point, when I would show up for a retreat, I would say to the registrar, what's the job that nobody wants? Give me that one. And of course, it would be the toilets. And it's just like letting go, right? Like, I don't mind cleaning toilets. That doesn't bother me. And, no big deal, But we get this idea, I want to be in the kitchen chopping vegetables, or whatever. I want to be cleaning the meditation hall. Now, and of course I took a little ego pride in it, and it was like, well, I am the person who takes, but it just was like, it felt good. It was like, this is great. Do the one that nobody wants. And it's really not, I don't mind it. It doesn't
and then
bother me.
Don't tell anybody about it.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm telling you and the whole world, so you'll know,
It's all right. This is for a good cause.
But, I'll say that when I have a self-retreat, one of my favorite things is cooking for myself and cleaning, because sitting there and meditating gets really old after a while.
Good.
And it's funny because I've, talked to people who were doing self-retreats, and they're like, well, I'm going to prepare all this food beforehand so I don't have to cook. And I'm going to this and that so that I can just meditate the whole time. And I'm like, 6 or 7 hours of sitting still is enough for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to enjoy, the ordinary activities. And because I want to practice those things, it's as important, if not more important, for me to learn to be mindful making soup than it is for me to learn to be mindful sitting still. I mean, it's a lot, that's easy. I mean, relatively, it's not really easy, but I'll close my eyes and follow my breath. And the thing is that what's really going on there in terms of the person who just wants to sit and meditate is that they're striving and they're trying to get into some kind of states, and they don't want to let go. When they get into these concentrated meditation states, they don't want to let it go, and they get very attached to it. And it's like, and that's just one of the hindrances, one of the mistakes that people make in their practice. It's a normal mistake. Once you experience bliss in meditation, it's very hard to not think, that's what this is about, getting to that state of bliss, but after you do it for a while, you realize, I can't hold on to that. So it can't be about that,
It's cleaning up the bliss in the toilets, huh?
Yeah. After the ecstasy, the laundry,
The laundry.
Yeah.
Did we cover each of these?
Oh, no, I didn't get to the last three. So we covered right view, right intention, and then the three middle ones.
Action, livelihood, and speech.
Right. And so the last three are the ones that are about meditation. Right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration.
Okay, good.
So right effort has a classical sort of definition. It's basically about letting go of the unwholesome and cultivating the wholesome. The description that I prefer, there's a couple of different, I'd say there's two classic descriptions of right effort in the suttas. One is this very structured thing, let go of the unwholesome, cultivate the wholesome. The other one, though, is about balance, and I like the one about balance. And the Buddha gives this teaching to this monk who was a musician in his lay life. Sona was his name, Ajahn Sona, or Bhikkhu Sona. Anyway, Sona. And he says, when you had your lute, if the strings were too tight, they wouldn't be in tune. And if they were too loose, they wouldn't be in tune. You had to have them be right in the middle place, the place of balance, not striving too much. I'm going to meditate and get enlightened, and not just kicking back like, just let it all go and let it all flow by, but like making an effort that's not striving. And that's the key to meditation practice. And it's something that requires mindfulness. You need to be mindful to know whether you are striving.
Right.
And it requires a vigilance, because your need for effort rises and falls. Sometimes you sit down and you're kind of already settled and you don't have to make a lot of effort. Other times you sit down and, your mind is really busy and you really have to make effort. Or you start falling asleep and you have to really make effort to stay awake, etc. These different things, everything's changing.
Right.
And so right effort isn't about one thing. It's about being mindful of what's called for in this moment.
This moment. Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then that's right effort. And then right mindfulness. The Buddha points to 4 aspects of experience of the body, feeling, tone, just like the pleasant, unpleasant quality of experiences, mind states, and then phenomena, which is a somewhat technical thing that I don't really have enough time to go into, but really involves our view. The way I put it is seeing our experience through the lens of Dharma rather than through the lens of self. So it's this spiritual question, what is happening right now? And how do I understand what is happening right now? And if I view things as through the sense of self, I say, well, things are happening to me, and I want them to be this way, and I don't want them to be that way. And that's the self-centered view. The Dharma view is what's happening right now is that everything is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. For example, everything is in flow, and so it brings in all the principles and all our affairs.
Can I be at peace with that?
Yes, that's right. Exactly.
Peace.
Yeah, just be with things as they are. So
second half of the serenity prayer doesn't get said. Taking this sinful or broken world as it is, not as we would have it. Not as we would have it. And we want it a certain way.
Yeah. No, exactly. So that's right mindfulness, right effort, right mindfulness, and then right concentration is really about quieting the mind and focusing the mind and training the mind. So it's largely about the discipline of meditation. But it's also, we can see how our society is, and there's a lot of talk about this these days, as a society is becoming less and less capable of paying attention for sustained periods of time. And that the screens, and particularly smartphones, the continual distraction, that people can't stay with something for a long period of time. And so, to accomplish anything serious in this world requires sustained attention. To write something, to solve a problem, to create a computer program, to design a building, to sit with somebody who's suffering, for a therapist, for an hour, really valuable activity requires sustained attention. And we're almost training ourselves in just the opposite way. Buddhist meditation is meant to be a way to train the mind to stay with a topic, stay with things in a sustained way. And that's why the Buddha calls what he teaches a training. One trains thus, he'll say, breathing in. I'm aware that I'm breathing in.
You say under mindfulness and concentration that these help us to re-engage with the world. And I put in parentheses, socially and politically. And this is really different from what we're taught in 12-step, where we have no opinions on outside issues. I think if I'm reading it right, it should lead to action in the world, politically and socially.
Yeah.
And, I remember, the Vietnam War was going on when I was, just before I'm getting sober, I was your peace activist and all that sort of stuff. And I came into AA and it was like, oh no, we just kind of leave that at the door.
Yeah.
I think it's wise to do that as a group, but individually, I think we pay a price for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're trying to practice your principles in all your affairs, then one of your affairs is the, social, communal, political.
Right.
Well, that's more than one. That's three. Yeah. How can you, believe in like nonviolence, for instance?
Yeah.
Or that all people are, deserve respect in the world. Mm-hmm. How can you believe that and then go out and be a racist, or support war? Spiritual principles are in opposition to all that. And certainly some of the leading Buddhists, contemporary and 20th and 21st century Buddhists, have been engaged Buddhists. And Thich Nhat Hanh is the most famous of these, Vietnamese, and obviously we know where his motivation came. But one of my favorite and most important teachers, Bhikkhu Bodhi, who's an American, spent many years, decades in Sri Lanka and became one of and maybe the leading translator of the early Buddhist texts, which had never been compiled into English translations. And so he's done this incredible work. Mm-hmm. He's probably close to 80, if not 80 now, doing these translations that really the work of a lifetime. And about 20, 25 years ago, he came back to the U.S. and was really disappointed to see how Buddhists in the West were just sort of meditating, but not really bringing those values into their lives or into the public sphere.
Right.
And he's been a strong voice. He's spoken at the UN. He started a nonprofit called Buddhist Global Relief that takes food to areas of great poverty and emphasizes a lot helping young women to get educated, because they found that the biggest connection between an area getting out of poverty was starting to be fed was that when the women became educated, which is, very interesting. But, obviously there's a lot of reasons for that. But so they emphasize those two things. But in any case, that's this great translator who could have just hung out in Sri Lanka for the rest of his life in a monastery and meditated, and said, no, like, I need to do something more active in the world.
Yeah.
And has really pushed Western Buddhists to be activists.
I think you tell the story in this chapter about you went to a demonstration, an anti-war demonstration, and there were a group of you all meditating.
Yeah.
Rather than, getting angry and all that sort of stuff.
That was a really powerful experience. I appreciate you bringing it back up. Yeah, it was about the Iraq War, the initial invasion in 2003, I think. And I could feel how, I don't know if there were dozens of us sitting there. This was right down by the ferry building in San Francisco. And then there were thousands of people around us. But, occasionally you kind of would open your eyes and you would see that people were looking at us and that they got it.
So you guys were there peacefully meditating.
Yeah. And it was like we were communicating something without doing anything, without words. And and people were like, oh, yeah. And some people would join us, and they would sit down and join us, because it was like, oh, this is about not having a war, and these people are acting peacefully. Because meanwhile, there's people up on the podium like screaming and yelling about how evil everything is, the administration is. And it's like, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And the way you're saying it and the way it's coming out of you is the same thing. It's just anger fighting against anger. Mm-hmm. The classic teaching from the Dhammapada, that hate will never end by hatred, but by love alone, hatred end.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
Interestingly, the Oxford group over time morphed into a peace movement.
Really?
Yes. I mean, politically, it was a peace movement.
Well, and I'm seeing in the No Kings movement right now, if we call it that, the playfulness of it.
Yes.
I've been to a couple of marches, and it does not feel like people are angry. It feels like people are joyful in getting together and seeing, oh, we're all together and this is great. And you have the people, wearing the frog costumes or different outfits and playing, having fun and making it joyful. And so much more constructive than, throwing rocks or something.
Yeah, the nonviolent element is really important, very important. And then I know we've gone over time, but just very quickly, since we live in the now, you then have a short chapter, back to step one. Back to step one. My first sponsor said, Bill, you can understand what it means to be powerless over alcohol. You can get that 100%. The depth of the unmanageability of your life, you will never in this lifetime come to terms with, So I love that, because I do have to go back to step one. I do it with unmanageable, that word, which was an Oxford group word.
I don't remember what's in the book, so I'm looking at it. Now, I've got these new glasses I have to...
Yeah.
There is no end to the steps, right?
Yeah. It's the depth. It's the depth of this.
And this is really about the idea of of continuing to work the steps, but not necessarily in a linear way, as we kind of referred to before. Like what's called for right now? Do I have a feeling of powerlessness, or do I need to make an amends, or do I need to do some inventory? Do I need to let go? Do I need to turn it over? And that's what's beautiful about the steps. And that's what I consider living the steps, is when they become integrated into your way of thinking and encountering the world. It's the same thing. I'm talking about seeing things through the lens of Dharma. It's like, oh, the steps are always there and available and needed. I will mention,
go ahead,
for those out there that the edition of the book that you have,
right,
there's a newer edition that has a foreword written by Bill Alexander, who's a Buddhist teacher in recovery. And then I wrote some kind of an afterword too. I don't know what's in it. I can't remember, but that's been out for a while. So, and it has a different cover, but anyway, for what it's worth.
I usually buy my books used. So there you go.
Right. My wife is just totally like the library. It's like, I want to buy a book. No, I don't want to have more books around the house. I'm like, I love having books around the house. What do you mean?
Any parting thoughts, Kevin? I want to thank you sincerely for doing this. I think it's been a very, very helpful series, and it's good to get to know you.
Yeah, good to get to know you too, Bill. And now, but first of all, no, I've really enjoyed talking with you and going over this stuff that's always interesting and always helpful for me as well, to keep my own recovery alive. If I can leave people with anything, it's just don't drink or use no matter what, I mean, it all starts with that, right?
It does.
Without that, and don't worry about whether you're an alcoholic or not,
Right.
Just realize that things are better when you don't drink and use. So don't, and do the work and keep coming back. I mean, keep doing the work. This is not a one-time deal. It's a lifetime deal. I think there can be this feeling I think very commonly when we're first sort of facing our own addiction and the prospect of getting sober, that, oh God, all the fun is going out of my life. And really the truth is that it's the beginning of your life. It's not the end of anything. It's the beginning of really finding happiness and joy and purpose and meaning. And so really, don't be afraid to do this. Mm-hmm. And it's not like, oh, well, I'll do that on Sundays or whatever. It's like, no, this is your life, and it's the best life you can have. Yeah. Again, not to think of it as like, oh, it's such an imposition because it's going to get in the way of. No.
Yeah.
It's rich and fulfilling in every moment, and gives you something to live for and live by in every moment.
To give back to.
Yeah. To give. It's all part of it. Yeah.
Well, again, my friend, thank you so much. And I want to thank our listeners. And I'm going to do a short series starting next week on the subject of hope. Got a psychologist in Portland, Oregon, who has done some serious research on it. And I think it's pretty fundamental to what recovery is about. So be sure to tune in next time for that. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you guys for listening. God bless. Namaste, and keep coming back.